Hello, I'm Kate. In my last video, I spoke about starting at level 3 for new DMs. In this video, I want to go a little bit deeper on starting levels, but for a different kind of campaign. We've all been in campaigns which are very combat heavy, you're facing down hordes of undead or some bandit infested road on the way to the big city. But this campaign that I want to talk about is for something more investigative, mystery focused, or just more non-combat related. In a non-combat related encounter, starting in the early levels can make things a little bit more difficult. So I'm just going to place down a token here, we'll use that one. And here's my scenario, let's say. You're an early level player and you come across what appears to be an abandoned manor. It's lavish and fairly richly made, the gardens are well kept. There are two graves and what appears to be a kind of nicely drawn carriage. Everything looks as it should, but it's all slightly off. Well, what do you do? Most likely, you roll a skill check of some kind. Arcana, perception, investigation, or some other varying sort to try and find out what is going on in this area. But at a lower level, you don't really have a ton of proficiencies or skills to help you past hopefully succeeding that check. And here is the crux of what I'm talking about. If we're starting at level 3, then you have the beginning of your archetype, a couple of proficiency points, and maybe if you're lucky, really lucky, a feat or some kind of proficiency in a various skill to help you ascertain what is going on. Now, in this particular scenario, this is a haunted manor that I made for my players a while ago. And we had like characters that came in and kind of helped relax them, made things seem calm, but they were much higher level and had a few more tricks and passive perceptions to allow them to ascertain what was going on. So, levels. Where would you start? For a mystery or investigative campaign, which is kind of what I'm really aiming this video at, I'm going to suggest that you start really at level 7. You could start at 5 if you still want to kind of go through the early switch and maybe build into it later, but 7 is really where things start to come online for players. And I know that my videos are kind of based more towards newer DMs right now, but I do want to say that giving your players more to work with really makes your role as a DM far easier. Half of running Dungeons and Dragons and being a dungeon master is learning to work with your players and allow them to provide things that help you as well as you to provide things that help them. So we're going to go through it point by point. So for my first point, proficiencies and skills are a key part of why starting at a higher level like 7 or even 9 is a better start for your more non-combat-y focused adventures. So we've got our little player character here again, and she's gone down the hall and she pauses at a door. Her passive perception is now high enough that she's noted there is a red stain leaking out below the door. Maybe she rolls medicine and succeeds and is able to denote that it's blood. But she hasn't noticed that there is a cannon to her right, and the cannon fires as she set off a trap. Now, because she's a higher level, it's more likely that she can 1. Take the hit, and 2. May have some form of reaction or response that she can make to get herself out of this situation. Non-combat focused encounters do not always have to involve mystery and, just giving players details. They can still be danger to them. You can have traps. And the higher level characters having a bit more to respond to you with really allows you to do more with your DMing. Dungeon mastering, especially as a newer DM, you need to learn that giving your players more helps you as the DM as well. especially in learning how the game works. Half of running Dungeons and Dragons overall is bouncing yourself between the players giving you stuff and you giving the players stuff. The higher level your players are, the more things they want to do, the more that you can then in turn do for them. My next point is specifically regarding items and magical sundries. Whilst these aren't specifically level related instances, it does kind of go without saying that the higher your players are, the more stranger items tend to fit them. You can provide them with more dangerous things, cursed items, and things that would be able to play out in a more specific scenario or a more intense scenario without accidentally killing the party in an unintended fashion. For instance, a cursed sword that only reveals its propensity to drain the user's blood during a full moon or when it lands a killing blow. At lower levels, this is probably just going to cause a TPK, especially if the blood drain damages the wielder or causes some kind of malefic effect to them. At a higher level, this might start some party worry and could lead into an interesting scenario that you've created, but it's probably not going to instantly kill them. This is a very specific way of doing things, but there are a lot of different items that you could throw in at higher level that have more crazy effects, whilst also having significant downsides, and that can play into the direction of your campaign. I've heard of items which increase player stats whilst also negating certain stats, and for some people they would kill characters when their stats reach zero or comatose them or sufficiently wipe out the character in a way which frankly is basically a player death in its own right. But at a higher level, you have more stat propensity to keep this going. My last bit on this will be around narrative scaling in response to the level. If we look at a couple of the abilities that player characters can get at higher levels, they're fairly more interesting the higher they get. We have universal speech, providing the whole kind of talking in many different languages, um, manifest mind, the kind of awakened spellbook, and the various actions that can provide. More malleable illusions, doing a little bit more creative magic and illusory tricks, which could really open up scenarios. And the hunter, providing these kind of different horde techniques and ways to get around combat. Why I'm drawing an analogy to this in regards to narrative scaling is simple, at least in my eyes. There is a fairly kind of unspoken rule, at least due to the fact that it's written down, I believe, in I want to say player handbook, but it might be the DM's guide. That each kind of level section, the players become more advanced. Around 1 to 3, you could say that your player characters are newly adventurers, becoming stronger than your average town guard, or maybe a captain. But by 5 to 7, they've started to become heroes in their own right and are probably receiving recognition, at least in some regard. They're not going to be, the legendary heroes of all time, but they're definitely getting on their way. And this, provided with a little bit more archetype ability going on, makes room for you as the DM to do a little bit more, to throw in more villainy, more fear into encounters, a little bit more general skullduggery in what you're having going on around them. It's too often the case that you inform worry and fear through the threat of a TPK. And what I think that you should be doing instead is as you create higher level characters, you instead strike on emotional issues in the campaign. Because the higher a player character is, the more they are able to get out of these situations, which creates more fun scenarios for you to manipulate how they get out of those situations. So I'm just going to highlight this briefly using the token again and say that, our character, the Solomere, wanders into this garden and she finds a beautiful undead woman who, to her, appears seemingly calm. There is nothing alarming about her, and yet something shifts. She notices something is off in the room. Perhaps she rolls a high arcana roll and decides to dispel magic, and is greeted by twisting horrors, the crackling of bone. The woman turns around, does that kind of owl head turn, and stares at her with haunting gaze, and warns her of the horrors of the manor. This is very much an attack on the player's psyche, not on their characters, but it's making use of more advanced spells and abilities that they've got at a higher level, which give them more options than simply going, I roll this check, what do I notice? Which is what I would say is what makes things way more interesting about running higher level characters. Yes, you can put them in a spot where they're gonna just face the horrible monster, but way more interesting if you maybe set aside a couple of combat encounters, but more build on the horrors and use their newfound tricks to layer on clue after clue about the impending danger that they're walking into. But that's all for now, though. I just kind of wanted to give you some different options as to the ways in which you could start at different levels, as opposed to just starting at level 3 like I suggested in my previous video. Level 3 is great. Look at my video if you kind of don't understand why I'm suggesting that, but there are many different ways and different level points that you can start at for one-shots and different styles of campaigns. And I hope that this maybe at least kind of elucidated you a little bit on how that works. But otherwise, thank you for watching. And as always, I'll link a couple of the websites I used in this video down below. And there's my Patreon, Caitlin's Bustling Workshop, down along with my social. Please check it out, and thank you.